Well, good morning and welcome to this 13th day of the Clauchrie wind farm inquiry. Today we're continuing our consideration of the topic of radar mitigation. First of all, can I check that everyone's technology is working? Mr. McLeod?
I can hear you, sir. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. And Mr. Brown?
Good morning, sir.
And I can see your witness there. Mr. Kirkland, is it?
Yes, it is. Morning.
Yes, I can hear you too. Good morning. I won't repeat the announcements I made at the start of the inquiry, but those are all available to view on the DPEA website web stream for the 24th of May. Now, before we get into today's business, are there any updates on this matter of the list of questions for Mr. Rees?
Yes, sir, if I may address that, and I apologise in advance to Mr. McLeod for not contacting him. This morning's been a bit of a rush, so I've not had an opportunity to speak to him, so my apologies, Mr. McLeod. But yes, we have looked at the questions again, and I think we are now there, sir, but it may have to be in the basis as discussed yesterday that what happens is that we have the agreed questions and we have specific questions from the applicant and specific questions from the airport. Now, there has been a travelling document being exchanged between the parties, which has been helpful to work out positions on questions. But what has happened, I realise, sir, was that it will not be terribly user-friendly from your perspective to see all of that. So what I've asked is that in addition to that table of the travelling, which is the travelling document, there should be an appendix to it where the questions are extracted and put into one single sheet, which you can look at, sir, to see what the questions actually are, and will identify where the questions came from. And of course, sir, you will then be able to add your questions, if any, to the table. I'm sorry, as I say, right, the way it's come about this morning, but perhaps the way to deal with this is to continue with the evidence for the moment. My solicitors are sending the table extracting questions at the moment to the applicant, and that would give Mr. McLeod an opportunity to look at those with the applicant to make sure they are the questions. And then once we have finished the evidence from Mr. Kirkland, perhaps we could have a further conversation about this, sir, to discuss the actual mechanics of getting your questions and getting the table with the questions to Mr. Rees and how Mr. Rees should respond.
Yes, I'm happy to revisit after Mr. Kirkland's evidence. Mr. McLeod?
Yeah, that sounds fine to me. On the point that Mr. Brown makes about the user friendliness of it, we had the same thought, and actually we were thinking that we would probably just send what Mr. Brown's described as the appendix. In other words, the clean version of the questions to you, because I'm not sure that you're going to benefit from the to and fro that has gone on during the week. So I'm quite happy that you just get the questions as agreed and the specific ones from the applicant and from GPA. And that hopefully cuts down on the amount of paperwork that you need to read for this part of the process.
I imagine that would be fine, yes. I was only envisaging seeing the questions themselves. So are we still hopeful then that this can get to Mr. Rees today?
Well, sir, I would have thought that if the extracted table is agreed with the applicant, the parties will certainly be ready, but I'm conscious, sir, that you may wish to have some time to look at it as well. The expectation on Mr. Rees's part, when the matter was discussed with him at the start of the week, was he would have the questions on Monday. So I would have thought, sir, that if you wish to take some time to reflect on the questions, if Mr. Rees had the table of questions by, say, midday on Monday, that should be sufficient time for him to respond by the end of the week.
Fine. I mean, I suppose I was anticipating that we wouldn't be spending all day with Mr. Kirkland, but we'll see how things go. Right, thank you for that. Then I'll go back to Mr. Brown then to introduce your next witness, please, Mr. Brown.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Kirkland, could I ask you to have before you your recognition, please?
Yep.
And You previously gave evidence to the inquiry in connection with the aviation lighting issue, and you introduced yourself to the inquiry at that stage, so I'll not ask you to do that again. But could I please ask you to go to paragraph 6 of your recognition and start reading from there to the end of paragraph 9, please?
Okay. There are a number of ways in which multiple turbine clutter can present a safety hazard to air traffic controllers. A, it can obscure genuine radar returns from aircraft. B, an aircraft unknown to the air traffic controller may be within the clutter area, but be obscured by it. C, it can affect how aircraft are tracked when flying through the clutter area. Essentially, the radar systems can get confused, which can lead to false position reporting of the aircraft. This is known as track abduction and has serious implications for aircraft separation. The impact of clutter within Class G airspace is potentially very acute, given that it is an unknown environment in which aircraft can legitimately operate without receiving any sort of service from ATC, air traffic control. Such aircraft may be operating at the same altitudes as commercial, military, and other traffic being controlled. The clutter, being similar in appearance to an aircraft, then removes the controller's ability to detect such unknown. In order to ensure safety and to mitigate the safety impacts described above, air traffic controllers can turn aircraft to avoid areas of clutter which could be hiding, masking, or corrupting the returns from other real aircraft. Another option sometimes available to air traffic controllers is to reduce the type of service that aircraft receive in the vicinity of clutter. However, that has a detrimental impact upon the expected service within the region and will increase risk. Service reduction effectively removes the fundamental capability of the air traffic controller to recognize unknown aircraft using PSR, primary surveillance radar, and to provide essential collision avoidance advice. Avoiding a single area of clutter with one single aircraft is not necessarily a massive problem, but when there are multiple aircraft and multiple areas of clutter, this creates an exponential issue, the number of options as to where controllers can guide the aircraft rapidly reduce. This leads to a situation where serious impacts upon the service provided occur, namely that additional track miles are flown with corresponding additional fuel burn and emissions, and lack of flexibility in terms of how the traffic is controlled. With no clutter, the controller has many options for tactically controlling traffic by guiding aircraft within the entire area of airspace. Future changes and developments such as new routes, airspace changes, and airspace user changes, such as the proliferation of unmanned aerial vehicles, will be hampered.
Thank you. And can I ask you now to turn to the last page of your recognition and to read your conclusion?
If the development is not mitigated, it will create safety and service provision risks in the radar environment. All available guidance and policy from UK CAA directs that if there is an impact upon safety or service provision, which the incumbent ANSP assesses as unacceptable, then technical mitigation will be required. It is my view that a technology-based mitigation solution is the only feasible long-term option to avoid any adverse impact on the airport's radar.
Thank you. Now, can I ask you just to confirm for the inquiry what the acronym ANSP stands for?
So, Air Navigation Service Provider.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Kirkland, are you content for the remainder of your recognition to be taken as read by the inquiry?
Yes, I am.
Thank you. Now, Mr. Kirkland, in your expert report, which is GPA 03, you have included in the appendix, as an appendix, your CV. Is there any additional expertise or recent experience to be added to that list?
Yeah, that was a few months ago that was written. So the most recent update is that I'm currently working on an airspace change proposal in support of changes to Glasgow Airport's airspace.
Thank you. Now, we've heard a lot in this inquiry about the work of an air traffic controller. When an air traffic controller is doing their job, what ethos do they bring to bear as they do their job?
Well, I think first and foremost, obviously, safety is paramount in everything that we do as controllers. So we're conscious of safety at all times. We have a very real sense of responsibility for safety and for the people aboard the aircraft. So I think controllers will always strive to provide the best service they can. I think they're just acutely aware of the safety critical nature of everything they do.
Yes, and I've heard from the inquiry about the fact that in Class G airspace, there's no requirement to provide service. But if an ATC received a request for service from an aircraft in Class G airspace, how are they likely to react to that?
Well, they will all try and provide the service requested by the pilot. So in Class G airspace, if a pilot requests deconfliction service, the controller will always try and provide the service requested by the pilot. Normally that's the highest level of service available. Pilots would normally request the highest level of service available, and controllers would strive to provide that.
Now, what ongoing training do air traffic controllers receive?
Ongoing training, probably the main one is training in terms of unusual circumstances, emergencies. I guess it's a bit like pilot training, where they train for I wouldn't say common occurrences, but ones that do occur from time to time, like engine failures. So the equivalent in controller world would be simulation of unknown aircraft in airspace, zone infringements, aircraft with an engine fire, this sort of things that do not happen often, but controllers need to be prepared for. So this is ongoing annual training to keep controllers effectively up to speed in these unusual circumstances, so they're prepared for them.
Yeah, and why is that so important to give that training to an ATC?
Well, I think so that when unusual things happen, they're ready for them. So it's effectively to prepare them, and perhaps just almost to rehearse, if you like, some circumstances. So a common one might be an unknown aircraft pops up, and there's certain phraseology the controller has to use to provide avoiding action, and it gives them an opportunity to practice that, but in an environment where they don't know it's going to happen. So it's a realistic environment, and it prepares them for those real events, which they do happen from time to time, and controllers want to be prepared and do their best in order to resolve those scenarios.
Yeah, and we've talked about the human element, or the human impact element of what an air traffic controller does. What effect does that have on an air traffic controller's approach?
I think we're constantly aware that whilst the day job can be quite regular and routine, that they're acutely aware that it doesn't take long for something to go wrong. Things can go wrong very quickly, and they can be catastrophic. So there's always that in the back of a controller's mind. So I think there's quite a big human impact. We control aircraft, as you saw yesterday on the radar screen. There are blips on the screen, but clearly that's an aircraft full of people. So I think we are acutely aware of that fact, that the safety critical nature of the job, it's ever present, and when incidents do happen, which clearly they do from time to time, it has an impact on the controller as well. I think throughout our careers, there's probably there's some 2 or 3 incidents that every controller's had that do affect you quite significantly. We've all had them, and it's a very real experience.
Well, you've mentioned these events. Could you pick maybe one from your experience and explain it to us?
So yeah, I've probably been lucky in some ways that I've not had too many, but I've probably had a couple that will stay in my mind forever. One of them was, I mentioned unknown aircraft. It was a an aircraft that was actually not where he thought he was. He was flying visual flight rules with reference to the ground, quite low and therefore not showing up on radar. So he was inbound to the airport, and I detected through hesitancy in his voice that perhaps he wasn't quite sure where he was, and that is actually the case. He was looking at ground features and actually had misinterpreted them, so he wasn't where he thought he was. I was controlling a commercial aircraft, an A320 inbound to the airport with probably about 5 or 6 miles to go, so he was on final approach, quite low level. And I saw on my primary radar a return, just a single return, and it was pretty much on the nose of this inbound commercial aircraft. And that's one of the scenarios we sort of trained for, except it was a lot closer than most of our training had taught us to believe. So had to make a snap decision and thought it was the aircraft that was perhaps unsure of his position, and called it out to the pilot of the inbound jet, and it was. He basically looked out the window and saw it and managed to avoid it, but it was very, very close, and that's possibly the most serious incident that I've encountered, and that obviously that stayed with me for a long time. There was quite an impact on myself and for the captain too, actually.
Yeah. When you say for the captain too, what do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, I think clearly he was the one that was in imminent danger rather than myself, but he came across the tower afterwards to talk to me about it. And in fact, we talked for about 2 hours after it, and we shared our experiences. And he was quite shaken by it, as you would be, because that's a highly unusual and clearly very potentially catastrophic incident. So yeah, we were both quite shaken by it, to be honest.
Thank you. Now, we've looked at yesterday with Mr. Smith the radar screens which are available at the airport. Now, we talked quite a lot about that yesterday, but help us with this. When an air traffic controller is sitting at their screen, how do they actually go about doing their job?
So physically, yes, they're sitting in front of the screen. It's just like a large computer screen showing the area of airspace within which they're providing a service, and a bit more, because they want to see aircraft that are potentially about to join their airspace. In terms of actually doing the job, so they're speaking on the radio, they're marking up flight progress strips, which is in front of the controller. They're scanning they've built up a situational awareness of what's going on in terms of
Sorry, Mr. Kirkland, we lost you there for a moment.
Sorry, am I back?
Yes, you're back. You're back.
That's one of the scenarios we train for, loss of radio. So I don't know where so I was talking about scanning, the controller is scanning the radar screen for their areas of interest. Yeah.
Sorry, that was a bit we missed. So
Right.
if
Okay.
you'd start that bit again, please.
Oh, okay, sorry. So yes, the controller is scanning the screen, particularly for those areas where there is traffic and where there's about to be traffic. They're building up a situational awareness of the entire area of responsibility, if you like. Obviously that changes as traffic moves, but fundamentally they're building this picture in their head, so they're retaining a mental picture. Partly, obviously, to do the job, but also if in the event of a radar failure, you need to institute certain procedures. So you need to have a good situational awareness of the traffic at any particular time.
Now, when the controller's looking at the screen, what is it they're most looking out for on their screen?
Well, they're mainly looking at the aircraft which are under their control or being provided with a service. They're potentially also looking at what's coming next. So they're looking at the traffic that's creeping up on the edge of the screen that they may have to deal with in the future in 5 minutes' time. So they're effectively focusing on the aircraft that are moving around on the screen.
And we saw yesterday Mr. Smith speak to the Terna screen.
Yeah.
If you can remember that. What advantages does a screen like that provide for an air traffic controller doing their job?
Well, the two things, because we saw the contrast between the S511 and the Terma, and I think the Terma picture was much cleaner, and that's partly due to the nature of the radar. It's a more modern radar, processed, very clean returns, but also the fact that it seemed to indicate a lot less clutter. I think we saw the same exact time on both displays, and the Terma seemed to be pretty much free of clutter, and it just showed the aircraft symbols.
Right, thank you. Now, we looked at this question with the question of clutter with Mr. Wiley on Wednesday. Can I take you please to CD 9.2, and this is Matt's part 1, and it's section 1, chapter 6, and it's electronic page 131, and for those using the hard copy, it's 21.
Yeah, I've got that.
Yes. Now, looking at paragraph 18A2, you're talking about clutter and what impacts is it acknowledged to have, looking at 18A.2.
So, yeah, increased risk of the controller not detecting conflicting traffic, position symbols, track histories, and data blocks being hidden or obscured, generation of spurious tracks, which may be indistinguishable from genuine returns, delay in aircraft being identified and placed under an air traffic service, and increased controller workload.
Thank you. So, what looking at it in that context, what benefit does the Terma screen bring?
Well, it eradicates some of those impacts, particularly around the clutter. So, for example, we saw weather clutter yesterday. You know, that if that's not appearing on your screen, then it's not going to hide or obscure symbols, and because well, it's just a much cleaner screen. It eradicates many of those impacts.
And what of clutter from wind turbines?
Well, if the clutter's not there, you don't get those impacts at all.
Thank you. Now, there has been some discussion in the inquiry about ownership of airspace, if I can put it as broadly as that. And Mr. Thompson said yesterday the airport doesn't own the airspace. What would your comment be on that?
Well, I would agree. I don't think anyone owns the airspace except UK PLC. It's part of the United Kingdom's critical infrastructure. It's a national asset, I believe, that's defined as.
And you say it's a national asset and it's defined. Where would we find support for that?
I think it's in a few places. I think CAP 764 early on states that. I think it's in quite a few publications. I don't know if you want to look at it.
If we had a look at the air modernisation strategy, for example,
Yeah,
which the inquiries looked at before, which is CAP 1711.
yeah. What document reference?
CD 915.
15. Yeah. So this is the airspace modernization strategy. It will be in here. Here we go. So in the sorry.
Sorry, Mr. Kirk, on you go.
Yeah, so it's in the executive summary on page 5. It starts off, airspace is a crucial part of the UK's infrastructure. So, I think it does appear in a number of documents. It's basically saying that it's part of the UK's infrastructure and is not owned or allocated specifically to in terms of ownership to airports or providers.
And for those using the electronic version of that document, that was referenced to electronic page 8. Now, you'd mentioned CAP 764 in that context of that answer, which of course deals with the document on policy and guidelines on wind turbines. there, were you intending to take us to a particular section of that?
Yeah, I can. What's the document reference for that, Mr. Brown?
It is CD 9.4.
Okay, just give me a second. I know it's in here somewhere. Just give me a second.
Well,
Sorry, I found it. It's electronic page 14, section 1.3.
yes.
I think this sort of makes the point. All times responsibility for the provision of safe services lies with the ATS provider or ANSP. So what that's saying is that they don't own the airspace, but they do have the responsibility within that airspace. I think it's what it's getting at.
Thank you. Now, you remember that if you can just keep that document before you,
Yep.
764, you'll remember that I looked at this document with Mr. Wiley on Wednesday, and in particular, I looked at page 18, and it's electronic page 18 with them. And just at the bottom of page 17, we see this as paragraph 121. And at the top of page 18, I looked at the 3 numbered paragraphs there. And in particular, looking at paragraph 2, there were 2 topics which I explored with Mr. Wiley. First of all, there was, where it appears here in the paragraph, first of all, there is the concept of degradation to the service.
Yeah.
So I'll come back to that. And then at the end of that paragraph, there's reference to an area of which has any operational significance. So that was the second idea I explored with Mr. Wiley.
Yeah.
Do you have that? Now,
I do.
taking those in reverse order, what do you think an area of operational significance is?
So I think, well, from a controller perspective, pretty much anywhere I was providing or liable to provide a service to an aircraft would be operationally significant for me.
All right. And what about clutter? What effect would that have on the significance?
Well, I think in some ways it would increase the significance of it purely because of the impact that clutter would have on my ability to provide those services.
Thank you. Now, I've taken those out of order, so going back to the first concept of degradation to the service, Mr. Kirtland, what do you think is meant by that term, degradation to the service?
So I think it's pretty much any negative impact on my ability to provide a sort of normal level of orderly and expeditious service to traffic. So it could be things like having to limit the type of service provided due to the clutter, having to avoid the clutter, as discussed, to ensure safety. Pretty much any other impacts which would reduce my ability to provide the expected service.
All right. Now, remember that on Wednesday, I looked at that chapter 18, which I put to you before in Matt's part 1, and that's CD 9.2, and it's electronic page 131. Did you have that before you?
So what was the page number, Mr. Brown?
131.
131. Okay. Yeah, got that.
And I had put paragraph 18A3 to Mr. Wiley. To him now, I'll not ask you to read it because we can all read it for ourselves later on, but what's your view of the impacts, of the effect the impacts have upon the service?
Impact of turbine clutter.
No, yes, as listed. Well, do you want to read 18A3? That might help you.
Okay. The impacts listed above are likely to affect the degree, accuracy, and timeliness of the instructions, advice, and information that controllers are able to provide to pilots, with consequent impacts on safety and expedition. Additionally, the existence of clutter may necessitate aircraft being rerouted or air traffic services reduced below the level requested by the pilot. Specific tactical procedures to be applied by controllers in response to clutter observed on the situation display are provided below.
Yes, so how would you classify that, having regard to the paragraph we've looked at in MAT 764?
I would say those are all a degradation of the service.
Okay. Now, we're obviously looking at an area outside of controlled airspace here, and we see that this document also makes comment on that in paragraph 18B.
Yeah.
Now, again, it might just be easier, Mr. Kirkland, if you just read this so that you're familiar with it.
Shall I read it out?
Yes, please.
Okay. Outside controlled airspace, in the event of clutter being present on the situational display, controllers should consider the nature and extent of the clutter and, if necessary, take the following actions. For aircraft in receipt of a deconfliction service or traffic service, controllers should inform the pilot of the extent of the clutter and, where practicable, offer a reroute. However, this may not be possible due to traffic density, airspace availability, and/or the requirement to follow specific arrival or departure tracks. The extent of the reroute should, where possible, aim to achieve the planned lateral deconfliction minima from the observed clutter. However, it may still be necessary to reduce traffic information and, if applicable, advice from the direction of the clutter as detailed within CAP 774 UK Flight Information Services. For aircraft in receipt of a traffic service, those aircraft under a deconfliction service that is above, controllers to inform pilots of a reduction in traffic information stroke deconfliction advice as detailed within CAP 774 UK Flight Information Services. If the controller cannot maintain aircraft identity, the service shall be terminated. For all surveillance services, in order to maintain track identity of aircraft being vectored to final approach, if rerouting around the clutter is not practicable for the reasons specified above, an alternative type of approach may need to be conducted.
Yes, and having regard to CAP 764 in the paragraph we looked at before, how would you describe this set of consequences?
Well, I would describe those again as a degradation in service.
Okay. And I also looked at paragraph 18D, which is on the next page with Mr. Wiley, which is radar approaches in all classes of airspace. So, Mr. Kirkland, could you turn to that? And again, I think just read it out and then.
Sure. Okay, radar approaches in all classes of airspace. In addition to the procedures above, in all classes of airspace for aircraft intending to make a radar approach, the controller shall assess the nature and extent of the clutter and decide whether, 1, a radar approach is not possible owing to clutter, in which case the controller shall inform the aircraft, or 2, a radar approach could be carried out, but there may be a possibility of radar contact being lost. In this case, the controller shall inform the aircraft as early as possible that clutter is affecting his display and that missed approach instructions will be passed in good time if it becomes necessary to abandon the approach.
And again, looking at that in the context of CAP 764, how would you describe that impact?
Again, those two scenarios would be a degradation in service provision.
Thank you. Now, Mr. Kirkland, there's a statement made in your recognition. I'm not going to take you to your recognition because I'll read it out to you. In paragraph 30, you're dealing with your response to Mr. Wiley's report, and you say that section 382 of Mr. Wiley's report suggests that low traffic equates to there being no safety issues, and then you go on to say, in aviation terms, low traffic statistically does not equate to safety assurance. That phrase, in aviation terms, low traffic statistically does not equate to safety assurance. What do you mean by that?
What I mean by that is that just because there's a low low frequency of aircraft in a particular volume of airspace, that doesn't reduce the potential consequences or impact of an event. So that really just relates to say, yes, that it might affect the likelihood or frequency of occurrence, but it doesn't affect the actual impact or outcome. So low traffic does not equate automatically to assured safety, is what I'm saying.
Okay. And as far as low levels of traffic are concerned, how does that influence the question of whether mitigation is required?
Well, it probably doesn't influence it too much. I mean, you need to look at that balance of risk versus outcome, and for many instances, low traffic will not reduce the requirement for mitigation. It's the severity of the possible event that really is the trigger for me for mitigation.
Okay, thank you. Now, when an air traffic controller is looking at their screen and they see an area of clutter and they're trying to guide or route an aircraft around it, what degree of separation would you employ between the edge of the clutter and the aircraft?
I think I agree with what Mr. Wiley said. I think he said sort of 2 nautical miles was a reasonable amount. 2 or 3 nautical miles was what I would always take when I was an active controller. I would take a judgment on perhaps the speed and direction of the aircraft that I was providing a service to. Effectively, a judgment as to how much time it would give me if an unmanned aircraft were to appear from that clutter. So 2 to 3 nautical miles is perfectly reasonable.
So in practical terms for you as an air traffic controller and for the aircraft, what happens to the area of airspace above the clutter you can see on your screen?
Well, if you apply a 2 nautical mile buffer, if you like, then effectively the area you need to avoid becomes larger than the extent of the clutter itself.
And just to be clear about that, that's because you've added
Yes.
a buffer of two nautical miles all round that area.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, you'll remember yesterday that there was discussion about the safeguarding assessment to be carried under CAP 764 when a wind farm proposal is received. Now, in terms of your experience, have you got any experience of doing these assessments yourself?
Yeah, I've got considerable experience. In fact, I developed the assessment process and guidance for NATS airports back in 2002, I think it was. And I carried out assessments at Aberdeen Airport, Glasgow Airport, and some at Edinburgh Airport, but predominantly Glasgow Airport, probably over 100, to be honest. I trained other people to do it as well, so probably over 100 personally.
Okay, thank you. And having heard Mr. Thompson's evidence yesterday on how he went about the process for this particular development,
Yeah.
how does that compare with your experience?
So I think,
of following the process?
yeah, so I think from what Mr. Thompson said, from what he did was not unusual. I mean, each airport does it slightly differently, depending on circumstances and the processes they have. But what he did was perfectly reasonable. I think his methodology was probably slightly different from what I employ, but that's, every airport is different. So certainly what he did was a reasonable process. And I know there was discussion about documentation and such like. I think the key things for me when I developed the guidance, there were some differences between what I was doing and what Prestwick do, because Glasgow Airport, NATS provided the services under contract to the airport, so we had to provide a specific format to the airport. Clearly Prestwick, it's all in one. The air traffic is part of the airport, so it's a slightly different, it's a simpler process. But fundamentally, the process is the same. You do a line of sight assessment, and then you do an operational impact assessment. and then you move on from there. So it's the same process. Effectively, you're talking to controllers. That's how it works.
Thank you. And Mr. Thompson said yesterday that his experience of doing these, it was on, well, I think he actually went as far as saying he's only ever been asked once for flight data. What's your experience of such a request?
So, yeah, it's kind of unusual in the sense that when there's a large number of applications, you just don't have the resources to, when we first started off, for example, just to illustrate, developers used to come around to the tower. We used to meet with them for hours on end, and they would dispute things and all the rest of it. But we got to a level of maturity whereby they accepted the operational impact assessments and their validity. So we managed to cut down the time-consuming part of it. But when you're flooded with requests, you have to have a fairly brief but comprehensive process. And so the request for flight data would normally only come if there was a disagreement of some sort, and it would come at a subsequent meeting or number of engagement meetings when the application had moved on. It would be unthinkable for us as an air traffic service provider to provide radar data and recordings, and we just didn't have the resources or time to do that because there were so many applications. It was only if it really probably was coming much further in the process where there was a major dispute and we had to provide that level of evidence. There was a level of trust with developers whereby they didn't ask for that data because they had a level of trust in us as playing with a straight bat, if you like, in doing the assessment.
All right, thank you. Now, in the course of the inquiry, we have looked at the airspace change proposal for Glasgow Prestwick RNAV1 routes, which is CD 911. If you can have that before you.
Yeah, just give me a sec. Okay, I have that.
Now, before I come to consider this document with you, what experience, I think you mentioned you have some experience of doing these?
Airspace change proposals, yes. I've done a number. I've probably been involved in six or seven. They're pretty large, significant projects, so that's a fairly large number. I was involved in some airspace change work for the Greater Wash offshore wind farm project. I was involved in the project that put controlled airspace into Farnborough Airport. And quite a few other smaller projects. So I've got a fair amount of experience, I would say, in the ACP one.
Okay, thank you. Now, looking at the proposal itself, if you could turn to page 7, please. And
Yeah.
What if we look at paragraph 2.1? What was the need for this?
So this project was driven by it's called the VOR rationalization. Effectively, it's the removal of ground-based navigation aids, and those aids were used by airports, still are to a certain extent, to fly inbound and outbound procedures. But those, as technology moves on, that's quite old technology, they're effectively beacons and no longer required, and therefore there's a program to remove those in the fullness of time, and therefore there's a requirement to adopt the new technology, satellite-based technology. So that was the driver for this program, because at the time it was done, I believe, I think the relevant navigation aids were going to be withdrawn in 2019 or thereabouts. Now that's not happened; it's been delayed. But that was the main driving force behind this proposal.
Okay, thank you. And if we look at paragraph 2.3 at the bottom of that page, under the heading alignment with the CAA's future airspace strategy, FAS principles.
Yeah.
Maybe just read that and explain the significance of it for us, please, if you would.
Okay. The Future Airspace Strategy, FAS, is focused on upgrading the airspace throughout the UK and Ireland to increase capacity and efficiency whilst maintaining safety. The introduction of RNAV-1 SIDS, that's Standard Instrument Departures and Arrival Transitions at Glasgow Prestwick Airport, would improve systemisation and upgrade the navigation capability in accordance with the FAS recommendations.
What was or what is the Future Airspace Strategy?
So the Future Airspace Strategy, ironically, is in the past. It's been superseded. I think it was started around about 2011 or 12, and it was a national plan for upgrading and changing airspace to increase efficiency and environmental impact and such like. It was superseded, I think, in 2018 or thereabouts by the airspace modernisation strategy, which we've heard about before in this inquiry. So effectively, that's the new FAS. So it's different, but it's effectively interchangeable for the purposes of what we need to know, I think.
Yes, now just on that point about the introduction of the Future Airspace Strategy, I think if you turn to page 17, and
yeah,
there's a further explanation about modernising procedures in part 4.5.
yeah.
And if you just look at the second paragraph, that might just help you clarify the dates.
Okay, so it was 2011, and the plan was to span up to 2030.
Yeah. Now, in the context of the question of vectoring versus PVN, performance-based navigation, where in this document does it say that vectoring is not permitted or is not to be permitted under the proposal?
Oh, I've read this a few times, and I can't find that anywhere because I don't think it says that.
Well, does it think, or having read it, do you know?
Okay, I can't find it anywhere. Therefore, it's not in there. Therefore, yeah, vectoring is permitted.
Now, if we have a look at another document which was put to Mr. Smith yesterday, which is CAP 1738, and that is CD 916, and this is the Glasgow Prestwick Airport airspace change proposal, departure and arrival routes. And the difference this time is that this has now been promulgated, if that's the word, by the Civil Aviation Authority. And do we see on the page just behind the cover sheet in the bottom left-hand side, the date December 2018?
Yep.
And what does that tell you about this document?
It tells me that this document was issued in December 2018.
Right, thank you. And how would you describe this document?
So this document is effectively the decision document, if you like, from the CAA about the airspace change proposal. So an ACP is a proposal by a sponsor, an airport or an ANSP, saying we want to change something, and they then go through the process, which is not dissimilar to the planning process. And all the evidence is collected and collated and analysed by the CAA, and they come to a decision, and the decision is effectively provided formally in this type of document. So it's effectively the decision document, and often it would include conditions or any additional requirements, or indeed it may be a document which says it's not approved, but it's the decision document.
Right. And how familiar would you expect an air traffic controller to be with the document?
Well, I wouldn't expect a controller to be familiar with this at all, perhaps with the outcomes of it, but not with the document, no.
And when you say familiar with the outcomes of it, what do you mean by that?
Well, when you undertake an ACP, it's generally undertaken by an airport or a company on behalf of an airport, as this one was. This was carried out by NATS on behalf of Prestwick Airport. And generally it's a strategic type intent, and so the work is carried out somewhat remotely from the ATC delivery function at an airport. Now, it's done in coordination with them, and controllers are providing input to it. But when the decision is made, all the controllers want to know and need to know is, what is the outcome? What's the implication for me? What do I need to do differently? So in this case, the output to the teams at Prestwick would be, these new routes have been proposed, have been approved, and they are now published, and they're now valid routes, or they'll have a date for publishing them, and they will go and train on those and familiarise themselves with them and be ready to use them if and when.
Yeah, so when Mr. Smith said yesterday he wasn't familiar with it, how surprised were you by that statement?
I wasn't surprised at all.
And on what basis do you offer that view?
He's an operational ATC. His focus is on delivering the ATC function at Prestwick Airport, and he doesn't need to know the background to all of this. He normally, somebody in that role, when I was in that role, you would not be closely involved in this process. You would merely be interested in the implications and the outcomes, and how do I deliver this safely, and what do I need to do in terms of training my people and making sure we're ready for whatever the decision is to implement these in terms of timescales or whatever. So no, that's the reason. It's quite a technical and strategic function, the airspace change proposal itself, and Mr. Smith's team are interested in the delivery function.
Okay, thank you. Now, if we turn into the document itself, at page 5,
Yeah.
we see at the top there the objective of the proposal. It's just a short sentence if you just want to read that out.
Yeah, objective of the proposal: to introduce RNAV instrument flight procedures to mitigate the removal of navigation aids currently used for the extant arrival and departure procedures.
So that accords with the point which was made in the actual air change space proposal, which we looked at previously, which was prepared by Prestwick. Is that correct?
Yeah, yeah.
And moving forward in the document to paragraph 60, which is on page 20 of the document. Again, just read paragraph 60, please.
Okay, the introduction of the procedures is in accordance with the CAA's future airspace strategy, which aims to modernise the UK airspace and ATM, air traffic management infrastructure, through significant technological improvements by 2030 to make a more efficient use of airspace.
Okay, and that again, there's again a reference there to the future airspace strategy, and that's because that was the document which everyone was working from at the point of this being brought in December 2018.
Yeah, no, the airspace modernisation strategy.
And paragraph 61. You could
Shall I
read
read it?
it? Yeah.
Yeah. The proposal includes provision for those aircraft not equipped to fly the RNAV procedures, and as the aircraft fleet modernises over time, more aircraft will be able to utilise them. This ensures that owners and operators of all classes of aircraft continue to be able to utilise the airport's facilities once the proposed change has taken place.
And why was that a necessary requirement?
Because at the moment, not all aircraft are equipped to fly using this technology.
Thank you. And if you can turn to Appendix B, which is on page 22. Sorry, Annex B, which is on page 22.
Yeah.
Do we see at the top there the routes which were discussed yesterday?
Yeah.
And there's also sorry, yes. Moving on through the document, if we turn to page 30, and we see there a heading, the 7-stage process of an airspace change. You have that.
Yeah.
And if you could work your way through that and take us to stage 7, which is on page 32.
Okay.
Just read it again so that you get your bearings in the document.
Okay, stage 7 operational review. Around 12 months after a change is implemented, we will start a review of the change to assess whether the anticipated impacts and benefits set out in the original airspace change proposal and decision have been delivered, and if not, to ascertain why and to determine the most appropriate course of action. Once complete, we will publish the review on our website.
Now, this document is obviously in force at the moment, but in light of that, will it remain in the same format forever?
Do you mean the procedures or the?
Well, in terms of it's talking there about the operational review. What could the outcomes of the operational review be?
So yeah, I mean, this is a standard part of the process, albeit that this process has been superseded. It's still part of the new process, so that's not relevant. But yeah, so the review is really to ensure that the changes are as planned and deliver what they said they were going to deliver, and it's an opportunity for making changes or withdrawing or altering, in some way, making sure that the real life experience feeds back into the process and says, look, actually that didn't work quite as well as it should have done. We can then make changes or whatever. So it's a fundamental feedback and an obvious one. You can't just make a change and then and go on in the future without some sort of feedback and review process.
Now, again, Mr. Kirtland, where in this document does it say that vectoring is not allowed?
It doesn't.
And what basis do you say that?
Because it's not in there. I've read it, it's not in there.
Okay, thanks. Now, we've talked before about the fact that the Future Airspace Strategy promulgated in 2011 has now been superseded by the Air Modernisation Strategy. So, Mr. Kirkland, could I ask you please to look at that document?
Sure.
Which is CD 915.
Yep, I have that.
And for the sake of speed, if you go to page 6 in the hard copy, electronic page 9.
Yep.
And just read paragraph 3.
This airspace modernisation strategy responds to that requirement, setting out the detailed initiatives that industry must deliver to achieve the objectives envisaged in current government policy. It supersedes and replaces the Future Airspace Strategy, FAS, although many key elements of FAS remain relevant and are included in this new strategy. This strategy document has been developed by the CAA, taking into account feedback from stakeholders.
So from this and from your experience, is what's happened here, the initiatives have been carried forward to the Air Modernisation Strategy?
Yes.
So what, and we've looked at the Air Modernisation Strategy before, and we don't need to have the discussion about the prospects of it being, of when it's going to come in, but in terms of Prestwick's airspace change proposal, what part or what role does that play in the Air Modernisation Strategy overall?
So it's not an integral part of it. The ACP at Prestwick was driven by the withdrawal of navigation aids, and that dictated the timelines. That was the fundamental requirement. But clearly, when you make changes like that, what they were changing was not really the routes flown. They were replicating the existing routes. What they were changing was the means by which aircraft navigated. So it was a technology upgrade, if you like. And it made sense, clearly, with all the different options that are available, if you are upgrading those routes, then you would do that in alignment with what the Future Airspace Strategy, AMS, had in store for the next 10, 20 years. So essentially, it was complying with the technical requirements, if you like, of the navigation specifications within the AMS. So it was doing it in alignment with that. If you're going to do it in a future-proof sort of way, I think was the philosophy behind it, so that they don't have to make those changes in future in terms of the navigational spec.
And we've discussed before the fact that a modernisation strategy is a continuing work in progress. As that work on the AMS progresses, what impact might that have upon the route structures in CAP 738?
So, yeah, so at the moment, and we did touch on this in the previous lighting session, but the airspace modernisation strategy includes 15 initiatives. Some of those initiatives are directly relevant to Prestwick in the sense that they may impact upon their airspace. So, for example, one of the initiatives is about a complete review and reorganisation of the Scottish terminal manoeuvring area. So effectively, that's the airspace above Glasgow, Edinburgh and Prestwick. And that will have a potentially fundamental impact on the airports beneath it. So there are changes to be made to Edinburgh and Glasgow and the Scottish TMA airspace. We don't know what those changes will ultimately end up like, and therefore Prestwick know there could be an impact, but they don't know what the impact is going to be. So theoretically, no designs have been announced yet. So when that work is done, there may be an impact on those procedures that the Prestwick have brought in. They may need to change the procedures, they may need to tweak them, and they may need, who knows? But there's very much a real potential impact on those procedures.
Right, thank you. Now, going back to CAP 71738, it's obviously now been published by the CAA. What status does it give the document when it's been published by the CAA?
Status as in, is it sort of mandatory or yeah,
yes.
I guess it is mandatory in the sense that it's a decision document akin to a planning one. I think that's the status. I'm not an expert in that process, but I believe it's a mandatory. If it has conditions, if it has specifications or requirements, they need to be carried out in accordance with what's written there. You can't alter the outcome of it, I guess is what I'm saying.
Right. And although it deals with PBN, what are the barriers actually to switching to a full PBN system?
So I think this is the introduction of new navigation specifications to fly particular routes. There's nothing in that document that specifies a date by which that has to be the sole means of navigation within that airspace, and therefore effectively it's adding to the options of the controllers and pilots in that airspace. So for example, they have removed the conventional departure routings, and they've been replaced with the ones in this airspace change proposal. So the only way of flying these procedures now is the published set of procedures within the UK AIP. In the same way, the arrival procedures available to pilots are the ones that are published in the UK AIP. And these procedures are in there, but they're not the only procedures that are in there, for example.
Yes, well, on that point, Mr. Kirkland, we heard well, we didn't hear, we have to assume we heard on the start of the 2 video clips we tried to play that we heard Mr. Smith engage with a commander on board an aircraft, and the commander asked for routing detail. Why was the commander of that aircraft entitled to do that?
Because he has a choice. His airline has a choice. He has a personal choice of what procedures he flies. If they're published, he's permitted to fly them. So you will get a variety of requests from commanders of aircraft to fly different types of approaches. Sometimes they want to fly them for training purposes. Sometimes they want to fly them to ensure they're current in those procedures. There's a number of reasons why they will request different types of approaches, and that's always been the way. If it's a published procedure, they're entitled to request it.
Yes, you talked about this published procedure and referred to, was it the Aeronautical Information Publication? How you described it?
It is, yeah.
All right. Well, let me take you to that document, which is, and sir, I'm only going to work from the electronic numbering of this because it's enormous and it's just impossible working with the paper copy. So it's to be found in CD 9.7 and it's part 14. and it's electronic page 3403. Now, before we turn to have a look at that, Mr. Kirtland, can you explain for the inquiry what this publication is?
So this is the UK Aeronautical Information publication. Every nation pretty much publishes one of these. In the UK, it's I think it's published by NATS under license, if you like, for, on behalf of the Minister of State for Transport. So it's a national document, if you like. And what it basically includes, well, you know, if you saw the size of it physically, it's enormous. So it's split into many different sections. So in summary, it contains all information that an airline or a pilot or a controller would need to know about the airspace structures in the UK, frequency of beacons, positions of things. You know, it's got everything: the airways, routes in the UK, danger areas. It's a comprehensive and detailed manual of the current status of all navigation, communication, you know, it's everything. It's the entire aviation system of the UK in one enormous publication. And part of that is that each aerodrome in the UK, each licensed aerodrome is listed in there. So if you were a pilot, for example, flying to Prestwick, you would look up the Prestwick airport section, and that would show you the layout of the airport, the airspace, the procedures, etc.
Well, that sounds like a quotation, Mr. Kirtland. So if we could look at page 3403 and in general terms, just tell us what this is in relation to.
So I've actually got the paper copy here, so that number's not on it, but I think I'm hoping that's to do with Prestwick procedures, is it?
Yeah, what do you have a reference AD2 EGPK1?
11, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, is that it? Yeah.
Yes, that's it. All right. And I think we can see your point if we just scroll through that. We'll not do it, but you can see all the detail there.
Yeah.
And if we were to go to, oh, just before we do that, actually, again in the top right-hand corner, we see the date 21st May 2020. Do you have that?
Yeah.
How often is this publication updated?
So there's a publication cycle, which is 28-day cycle. So effectively, approximately every month, and any changes will be made on the central sort of database, if you like. So you'll find as you flick through, the pages all have different dates because each one is updated. It's a kind of living, accurate manual for obvious reasons. It needs to be, the data needs to be of absolute integrity. So yeah, it's a living document, updated every 28 days.
Okay, now on the electronic page, could I please ask that we turn to page 3433?
Could you give me the hard copy page, Mr. Brown? Sorry, I'm doing it the old analog way here.
Yes, it's AD2 EGPK-7-5.
Okay.
Yep, it has that.
Yeah.
And we see at the top right-hand corner of the page, just to be sure about this, it's dated the 5th of December 2019.
Yeah, got that.
Now, we see here a route which the inquiry has become familiar with by way of example, the Turnberry to Romeo transition.
Yeah.
So can we assume that what's happened here is this publication has been updated in light of the airspace change?
It has, yeah. Yeah.
Okay, now we discussed earlier the question of whether vectoring was mandatory at Prestwick. If vectoring had been prohibited at Prestwick, would you expect to see that reflected in this document?
I would, yes, definitely.
Now, given what you've explained about the very detailed instructions which this provides for in respect of Prestwick, if we turn to, we can expect to see the procedures for inbound traffic.
Yeah.
And if we turn to electronic page 3413, and for your purposes, Mr. Kirtland, it's AD2 EGPK-11.
Yeah, I have that.
And that's dated the 27th of February 2020.
Yep.
And we can assume from what you've explained about the updating process that this is the most up-to-date information for the airport.
Yeah.
Now, we see there section 1, procedures for inbound traffic, and we see subparagraph E, approach procedures with radar control.
Yeah.
And was that the process we saw happening when we looked at the videos yesterday for the Ryanair flight?
Yeah. Yes, it was. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Again, just start reading that paragraph.
Okay. Approach procedures with radar control. 1. When Prestwick inbound traffic is being sequenced by radar, the approach procedures will be flown under directions from the approach radar controller and will consist of that part of the approach between the terminal holding fix and the final approach path. When holding procedures are not in use, radar sequencing may commence before the terminal holding fix. Should I go on?
Yes, please.
Okay. Pilots should plan their flight profile in such a manner as to be able to achieve the minimum holding level at the appropriate holding point if so required. 3. When an aircraft is under approach radar control, changes of heading or flight level altitude will be made only on instructions from the radar controller, except in the case of radio communication failure in the aircraft or at the radar unit. Headings and flight levels / altitudes at which to leave the holding areas will be passed by ATC. Radar vectors will be given, and descent clearance will include an estimate of track distance to touchdown. Further distance information will be given between the initial descent clearance and intercept heading to the instrument landing system. Speed control may be applied on a tactical basis to aircraft whilst radar sequencing is in progress. Aircraft unable to comply with requested speeds should inform the radar controller immediately and state what speeds will be used. In the interest of accurate spacing, pilots are requested to comply with speed adjustments as promptly as is feasible within their own operational constraints, and should advise ATC if circumstances necessitate a change of speed for aircraft performance reasons. In the event of a radar failure, new instructions will be issued to aircraft under radar control, and the procedures as defined for approach without radar control will be put into effect.
Now, having read that paragraph, what does that tell you about the status of vectoring at Prestwick?
So it's a valid and commonly used and expected traditional way of controlling aircraft.
And why would vectoring have been retained?
Well, radar vectoring has, it can still be the most efficient way of operating it in certain circumstances, or in many circumstances. It can be requested by pilots, and often is, because they like that type of approach. It's relatively low workload, and it's they know they're going to get very direct routings. They know they're going to get you know, their miles will be reduced as much as possible, and so it's popular, it's common, it's fundamental to how ATC works, and it's an option available to both pilots and controllers.
Thank you. I think Mr. Smith said in his evidence yesterday that his experience of the introduction of PBN at Prestwick has been that, I think he said maybe up to 10%.
Yeah.
How surprising do you find that?
No, I'm not surprised, because it's the PBN approaches are an option at Prestwick. They are not the only option, and far from it. And at the moment, with fairly low traffic levels, vectorings are a perfectly good and efficient way of controlling the traffic. And also, of course, it's, you know, PBN is not mandated. It's not a piece of airspace within which the only option is to fly PBN approaches.
Yes, now if we were to take that example of airspace where there were only PBN approaches, what would that look like?
Clearly it varies. There are some airports that do utilize that often because of airspace limitations. So London City is one that springs to mind because it's got very busy. It's doing 35 pre-pandemic. It's doing 35 sort of movements an hour or more. You know, it's a busy airport and very constricted airspace below Heathrow's airspace. So I believe they've mandated PBN approaches as the only method of arrival if equipped.
Well, given the explanation you've given for the aeronautical information publication, we can go to the same information as we've seen looked at for Prestwick as we can for London City Airport. That'd be correct.
Absolutely, yeah.
So could we go to electronic page 2677, please? And for you, Mr. Kirtland, that will be AD2 EGLC9.
Yeah, hold on.
Oh, sorry, it's a different part. Sorry about that. It's part 9. Sorry, CD 9.7 again, but it's part 11 this time. Sorry, sir.
I've got it here. I think I got there quicker. The old methods are sometimes the best, you know.
Yes, I think that's probably right. You don't have to turn your screen.
The page number again, please.
Yeah, page number, sir, 2677.
Okay.
And again, just at the top right hand corner, we see the date 20th January 2021, Mr. Kirtland.
Yeah, got that.
And within the page reference number EGLC9, does LC just mean London City?
Yeah, it's the KO code for London City. Yeah.
All right. And if we go down to the bottom of that page, we see the flight procedures there.
Yeah.
Now, which part of this covers the fact that you made the point you made earlier about a PBN only environment?
So it's sections 1B and C are the relevant sections. Section 1 just tells you where to find the arrival routes.
Right.
So section B is saying RNAV, which is the PBN approaches, RNAV1 IFR arrivals from the en route structure via those 2 points. It says aircraft and crews equipped and approved for RNAV1 operations can expect to be cleared to fly an RNAV1 transition as detailed in that section. So that's telling crews that they can expect every time they can expect to fly an RNAV approach, PBN approach. And section C is basically saying if you're not equipped, which for London City would be highly unusual given the commercial nature of the operation, but if you don't have the PBN capability, then it says that non-RNAV1 arrivals will be vectored by ATC for arrival at the appropriate approach procedure. So it's basically saying if you're not equipped, you can expect to be vectored, and I don't know the statistics, but I'd be surprised if that happens.
So in
1% of the time.
So in relation to Prestwick, if that had been made a PBN only environment and the mandated routes had to be flown, what would you expect to see in the procedures for inbound traffic for Prestwick?
Well, it would probably be something pretty similar to this. It would effectively say you can expect to fly PBN RNAV approaches and perhaps would not give you all the other options that are currently in place.
So, sorry, just for my own understanding, RNAV and PBN are the same thing.
I think yes. RNAV is the RNAV1 is the kind of effectively relates to the accuracy of the track keeping, if you like. So they're very precise approaches, and you get different levels of that. So I think for the purposes here, you can probably take it as meaning exactly the same thing. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So, Mr. Kirtland, having conducted that review, we've been through all of the airspace change proposal, which was put forward by the airport, and having conducted a review of CAP 1738, which was when the CAA mandated the proposal which Prestwick had put forward, and having looked at the aeronautical information publication with the flight procedures for Prestwick, drawing all of that together, how satisfied are you that vectoring at Prestwick is still permitted?
100%. It's there. It's an option. It's used and should be used.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kirkland. I've got no further questions.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. I think we'll take a short break there and come back at 11 o'clock for Mr. McLeod's questions.
Thank you, sir.
See you
Thank
at
you.
11 o'clock then. Thank you. Thank you. That's 11 o'clock. Mr. McLeod, are you back with us?
Sorry, sir. Sorry, that was I think we're all right. I think it's a test, but we'll just make sure. Yeah, no, it was a test.
Well, it seems to have stopped now, so I'm assuming that's fine. Right, Mr. McLeod, over to you for your questions, please.
Thank you, sir. Morning, Mr. Kirkland. I just wanted to pick up one initial question that came out from your examination in chief, and it was about this question of operational significance. Now, you were asked about your definition of operational significance, and I've got you noted as saying something along the lines of, from a controller perspective, it's anywhere that would be liable to provide a service, you would think that that would be operationally significant. So are you saying then anywhere that you would be able to make radar contact with an airplane?
No, I'm saying that wherever I'm providing a service or liable to provide a service, and by liable I mean an area where I have provided a service in the past and there's a reasonable expectation that I would provide a service there again. So it doesn't need to be. Sorry, go on.
No.
I was going to say it's not wherever I've got radar coverage and could detect an aircraft, although there are circumstances where aircraft would potentially call up a controller in an area that is not normally used, and the controller may be in a position where they would want to or need to provide a service, but that's probably an emergency situation.
I understand. So in essence, you're saying it's somewhere where you're likely to provide a service.
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah, I think that's a reasonable definition.
Okay, and that's clearly not something that can be drawn on a map.
Well, I think if you work at an airport like Prestwick, a controller there would be able to delineate where they regularly or are likely to provide services. So yeah, you could kind of point to it on a map, I think. The reason that you can't be too precise is that, so for example, an aircraft traveling from Glasgow to Prestwick, it may be handed over with coordination in Glasgow's airspace. And therefore you're providing a service in somebody else. So it's a kind of, it's a fluid situation.
No, I understand.
Okay.
But in essence, the likelihood of providing a service is something that comes down to the number of flights that one would handle.
Yeah, to a certain extent, yeah. I mean, I can't put a number on it, but obviously it's more than zero.
Yes, I'm not going to disagree with that. Right. Okay, let's have a look at your inquiry report first of all, please. And that I think is it GPA 03?
I'm not sure.
As long as you've got it in the report.
No, I have it. Yeah, got it.
And I wanted to look first of all just at pages 8 and 9. And page 8, you say in paragraph 39, anything which adversely affects or has a potential to adversely affect operational safety will lead controllers to take necessary actions to mitigate the risk. And then in paragraph 40, you go on to list a number of the actions that would or could be taken to mitigate the risk.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's nothing particularly unusual in any of those actions, is there?
I don't believe so, no.
And then in 41, you say that in essence, I think safety is paramount, but ensuring safety means that there may need to be some compromises.
I don't think I say that, do I?
Yes. You say, in other words, safety is paramount, and ensuring safety means that capacity, efficiency, and orderly traffic flow may have to be compromised.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Okay. All right. Shall I explain that?
You can do, although I was going to come on to paragraph 42 because you, well, actually to discuss it in the context of Clauchrie itself and just to think about what that means. So the safety issue, as I think you'll have heard me discussing with Mr. Thompson yesterday, is the possibility of two aircraft being in the vicinity of one another at the same point in time and being in the vicinity of Clauchrie at the same point in time.
Okay.
You agree with that?
Okay.
You agree that that is a safety issue we need to be concerned with?
That's the risk we're discussing, yeah.
It is, yeah, okay. So thinking first of all about a plane that might be in the vicinity of Clauchrie itself, it's unlikely to be one that's operating under IFR, or certainly one that's proposing to use the ACP route, is it?
I believe that they do provide services to IFR aircraft, yes, and there are perfectly legitimate reasons why that might be. IFR aircraft operating, for example, at 5,000 feet, it's perfectly possible, yeah.
But you wouldn't choose to vector an IFR flight over an operational wind farm, would you?
If it was producing clutter, you would certainly prefer not to, especially in Class G airspace. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. And so far as VFR flights are concerned, those flights would need to they need to plan in advance of getting off the ground, to put it in layman's terms, don't they?
Yep.
So they need to understand what obstacles might be in their way on their journey.
Right.
And they would certainly not plan to overfly a wind farm, would they?
No, I don't agree with that. I think VFR aircraft would quite happily fly over a wind farm, as long as they were terrain safe and clear of the obstacle by a sufficient margin. Yeah.
Okay, so that is a possibility then, you say?
Absolutely, yeah.
Now, if the VFR flight had chosen to flow in that direction, what do you say a controller would do if it saw it approaching the wind farm?
So on radar, they wouldn't do anything.
I mean, they'd monitor it, surely.
Well, yeah, I thought you meant in terms of instructions. Yeah, they would be monitoring it. They wouldn't necessarily be following it on radar. They could be, probably would be, but there's no requirement to identify it or to track it on radar. The pilot is flying his chosen route, which may be to fly over the wind farm.
Well, they presumably should be monitoring it if it was appearing on their screen.
Yes, but depends what you mean by monitor. Excuse me. If they're providing a service to the aircraft that's a radar service, monitoring means a slightly different thing. VFR aircraft will fly their chosen route and they will avoid weather or or whatever. Sorry, a frog in my throat. So the VFR aircraft are flying. Apologies. Are flying.
If you need another drink, then go ahead.
I didn't know whether to put it on mute or not, but I just went for it. I think we're all good. The VFR aircraft are flying their chosen route, so they can meander around airspace to their heart's content because they're flying visually. They will generally fly in relation to surface points like roads or whatever. Unless the radar controller has identified the aircraft, they have no requirement to track it. They're not getting that sort of service. In reality, yes, they would be looking at it for obvious reasons, because if that VFR aircraft flew over the wind farm and was lost within the clutter effectively, then that's of interest to the controller if they're vectoring aircraft nearby. But I'm not trying to split hairs here, but the VFR aircraft is navigating and flying in a manner that is dictated more by the pilot rather than the controller. It's probably the best way of putting it.
Yes. No, and sorry, it may be the way I put the question. I hadn't quite appreciated that monitoring would have a particular meaning in an air traffic context. In essence, what I suppose I was saying is, in layman's terms, if a controller saw an aircraft approaching an area of clutter, he'd be keeping an eye on that aircraft, wouldn't he?
Absolutely, because that would be an area of operational significance for the controller, yeah.
Well, it might be depending on other factors, such as the proximity of other aircraft. And I just wanted to touch on something that you said in your examination, Chief. This is about the degree of separation that a controller normally tries to achieve between an area of clutter. And I had you noted, I think, as two nautical miles.
Yeah.
Coming back to the ACP routes that we've discussed yesterday and you've discussed in your examination in chief, how far away is the runway? Sorry, probably best if we get figure 8 from the ACP proposal. And that's CD 9.11.
Okay. Yeah, got it.
So you'll remember we were talking about the runway 30 south arrivals route yesterday.
Yeah.
Do you know how many nautical miles away from Clauchrie that is, or could you hazard a guess?
How far the airport is?
No. How far would Clauchrie wind farm be from the runway 30 south arrivals route that's shown in figure 8?
You mean the Turnberry sort of transition, the west to east 7,000 feet line, yeah?
That's the one, yeah.
No, I'd have to work that out. I don't have a scale on this diagram. I don't know.
More than 2 nautical miles?
Yeah.
Double?
Probably, yeah. I'm not sure about the actual figure, but certainly more than 3 or 4. That's for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Why you mentioned 2 nautical miles? Why that distance, generally speaking, as a distance of separation from clutter?
So that's, I mean, that's just based on judgment and experience and call on the particular day of the situation, what the speed of the aircraft that you might be providing a service to. Essentially, it's a gap that's sufficient to identify or to have a chance of recognizing an unknown aircraft emerging from clutter will give you as a controller the opportunity to take the necessary avoiding action with the aircraft that you're providing a service to. So it's to provide a buffer, a level of comfort or opportunity to identify an unknown aircraft or something that could be presenting a hazard to the aircraft that you're providing a service to.
Yes, and I think what we can see then is that if air traffic controllers were instructing planes to fly the route that's been approved by the CAA, there would be double that buffer, wouldn't there? Yeah. Now, you talked about the fact that vectoring is not precluded, and just to be clear, it's not the applicant's position that vectoring is precluded at all. So I shouldn't be giving evidence, but that is the applicant's position. But just to think about the way that the ACP is put together, you're involved in a number, you've said, that there are a significant number of issues that are involved in pulling together an ACP, aren't there?
They can often be a huge project, yeah.
Yes. And they involve public consultation.
Correct.
They involve environmental considerations.
Yep. They do.
And presumably the airport, this airport, takes its environmental responsibilities seriously.
I would presume so, yeah.
Yes. And those would include, I suppose in the context of air travel generally, CO2 emissions,
Yeah,
noise emissions,
yeah,
and something we've not really touched on, but if you look at paragraph 5.8 of the ACP proposal, and that's on page 28.
yeah, I have that.
Tranquility and visual intrusion. And it says here, just to be clear, the proposed routes do not overfly any national parks or NSAs. As such, no additional analysis into tranquility and visual intrusion of the proposed routes has been commissioned. Now, just thinking about the location of the Clauchrie wind farm, you've given evidence already at the lighting session of the inquiry. You are obviously aware why the lighting proposal was put forward by the applicant.
Yeah,
It's related to the special status of the land around Clauchrie as a tranquil, dark sky area, isn't it?
yeah.
So if the airport was routinely overflying that area, contrary to the position it had put forward in the CAA proposal, that might not be very fair to those who've been consulted, would it?
So, firstly, I don't know, is the dark sky area, is that a national park or national scenic area, or is that something different?
Well, you're giving the evidence here. Do you know whether, do you know what status it has and whether it would fall generally within the definition of tranquility and visual intrusion?
I'm assuming it would, but I'm not an expert in that, so no, I don't know.
It's fine. We can leave it at that if that's your evidence.
Can I just add one thing though, that when we talk about overflying, you know, there are vertical restrictions about what overflying actually means. So, you know, if you take an extreme example, an aircraft flying at 31,000 feet does fly over plenty of scenic areas and parks, but that's obviously not a consideration. So it does depend on the altitude the aircraft is flying at about the impact and whether it should be considered or not.
One other point from this document that I just wanted to take you to, that there's been some discussion in the last couple of days about the question of the aircraft that can fly the PBN routes.
Yeah, yeah.
And I wanted to look at page 18 of the ACP, please, and paragraph 4.5.1.
Okay.
Just check the reporter's got that. Sorry?
Page 18, did you say?
Page 18, yes, it's at the very top, paragraph 4.5.1.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. So 451 is headed RNAV equipage. Most commercial aircraft already have the ability to conform to RNAV and RNPA-PCH. RNAV equipage rate for aircraft which operate from Glasgow Prestwick Airport is currently 86.9%. So it's a very small number of aircraft operating from Glasgow Prestwick that could not use those routes, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It's relatively small. Yeah.
Thank you. Now, just going back to the safety issue, I think we're agreed that for there to be any potential safety issue, there needs to be another aircraft in the vicinity of one that's overflying an area of clutter.
Yeah.
In preparing your evidence for this inquiry, you've presumably given thought to or searched for evidence of potential conflicts that have occurred in the past in this general area.
No, I've not specifically, no, because traffic obviously in recent times has been very different from the past, and often when you're looking at incidents of this nature with unknown aircraft, the very fact that they're unknown means they're not recorded. So you will have a rather skewed set of statistics if you look at what are presumably a very low number of reportable occurrences. That doesn't mean that those aircraft aren't there.
Okay. Well, we'll leave that point, I think. A point we perhaps touched on in the context of the ACP, just arising from your inquiry report, is paragraph 119, and that's on page 23.
Yeah.
You say, should the proposal, just check, the reporter's got that? Yeah. Should the proposal be approved and the wind farm constructed, then it would lead to reroutings and extended mileage of some inbound and outbound aircraft with a negative impact upon efficiency and fuel burn. What evidence do you have of that?
That's my opinion.
Yes, but an opinion is generally formed by considering evidence. So what did you consider?
Well, I considered the fact that aircraft do from time to time operate in the vicinity of where the clutter would be, and extrapolating from my view of the impact that aircraft would avoid that clutter, and therefore I've concluded that there's certainly the potential for reroutings and extended mileage and fuel burn.
Are we talking here about the unidentified aircraft or the aircraft, the general aviation aircraft, if you want to put it that way?
Well, I'm talking about any aircraft that are being provided with a radar service in the vicinity of the clutter. So inbound, predominantly inbound flights, but also overflights, potentially outbounds, although not many. Yeah. Are we talking cross purposes here?
We may be. So I suppose if we come back to Mr. Smith's example from yesterday, you remember the GPA 47. I think we saw the plane coming in.
Yeah.
The one that's being vectored across the corner. It's that sort of aircraft that you're talking about, rather than the unidentified aircraft that might fly over the top of Clauchrie, because I think you were saying the ATC effectively doesn't have control of that, so couldn't force them to move, if it were.
Right. Yes. I think we're agreed on that. Yes, that's the type of aircraft we're talking about. It's aircraft receiving a service from Prestwick that would require, in the opinion of the controller, to be routed around the clutter.
I see. Okay.
Yeah.
And then coming back to the rule of thumb that you explained earlier on, for any aircraft to require rerouting, they would have to be within 2 nautical miles of Clauchrie.
Yes, except that if you were taking into account the fact that you had to avoid that clutter, you would dictate much earlier on what heading, for example, if you were vectoring the aircraft, what heading the aircraft would take to avoid the clutter. So you wouldn't be, what I'm trying to get at is you wouldn't vector the aircraft up to the clutter, then suddenly turn it left and right and dogleg round. You would take that into account in your planning.
Yeah, and we've covered the point already, I think, but an obvious way to achieve it would be to fly the ACP routes that have been published by the airport.
That's an option.
It's the most sensible option, isn't it?
No, I wouldn't necessarily agree with that. No, it's an option.
Well, your clients proposed it to the CAA and the CAA approved it, so they presumably think it's the most sensible option.
It's an option. It's so the ACP routes. Let's kind of be clear about this. The ACP routes are as a direct result of the navigation aids being removed, and therefore they had to put something new in place. They've put something in place that complies with what will happen in the future. There's no need or requirement or desire to use those routes exclusively right now. So they are options, and in some circumstances they're not the best option, and the controller and the pilot will decide what the best option is at the time. And for Prestwick at the moment, vectoring is very high on that list.
And do you understand, and you may not, because I appreciate you're not an ATC at Glasgow Prestwick, but is vectoring high on Prestwick's list at the moment because of the clutter caused by Dersalach?
No, I think it's high on their list because it's for a number of reasons. And you're right, I'm not a controller at Prestwick, so I can't necessarily speak for them, but I think I know enough to have a reasonable opinion here. So vectoring is a fundamental tool in the controller's toolbox for controlling traffic. It can be the most efficient way sometimes of routing aircraft, depending on the circumstances. So yes, it is high on their list, but not just because of the clutter. They would do it without the clutter. It's a standard universal controlling technique that is expected by and desired by pilots and by controllers. There's nothing unusual about it. It's not bad. It's not old-fashioned. It's perfectly valid and often the best way of controlling aircraft. To be honest, I'm not going to tell Prestwick how to do their job here, but they clearly deem it as the main, often the main tool that they use to control aircraft, and that's perfectly reasonable.
Maybe put a different way, if or when Terma is turned on and Hadyard Hill and Dersalach disappear from Prestwick's radar, it would be possible to it'd be possible to vector straight over the top of those if vectoring continued to be desirable.
Correct.
And that would take, well, would that be a more efficient route than the one that we saw on GPA 47?
What was that? Was that the Ryanair? Would what be more efficient? Vectoring?
Routing straight over the top of Dersalach and Hadyard Hill. I'm
with you. So it would be pretty similar, but I'm guessing it would be slightly tighter, and therefore track mileage might be slightly less. As long as the descent profile was flown correctly, then it would potentially be slightly more efficient.
And again, that would obviously be further away than the 2 nautical miles from Clauchrie.
I'm not sure. I thought the scenario you were talking about, so all the wind farms have been mitigated by Terma, I thought was the scenario. Or were you talking about the others had been mitigated, but Clauchrie hadn't? Sorry, I'm not.
Yes. Sorry. Yes.
I'm slightly lost there. I've lost the picture slightly. Do you mean vectoring to the north of Clauchrie?
I suppose what I'm asking you is, if an aircraft was vectored over the top of Dersalach and Hadyard Hill, that would be further than 2 nautical miles from Clauchrie Wind Farm.
Okay, I think so. Yeah, I'm trying to think of the map in my head. So yeah, I think so.
Okay. Just coming back to your inquiry report, I just wanted to touch on paragraph 21, which starts on page 23 and goes over to 24. And
sorry, 121 was that? 121.
121, yes.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And you wanted to use the analogy of the airspace as a motorway. And I wanted to continue that theme, but just put a slightly different analogy using that theme to you.
Okay.
So let's assume that the approved south runway approach route is the motorway.
The PBN route with the Turnberry.
Yeah.
The Turnberry.
The runway 30 south approach.
Yeah.
So let's assume that that is the motorway. That is the airspace that we are most concerned with.
Okay.
First of all, would you agree that it's a relatively quietly trafficked motorway?
Yes, relatively at the moment. Yeah.
Okay. And secondly, when we think about the issue of conflict, you've got a number of potential unclassified roads that might join that motorway all the way along it.
Okay.
Following me so far?
I am. It's not in my air traffic brain though. It's okay. We'll stick with it.
Well, let me explain my thinking to you. What we're concerned with is the potential for two planes or two cars, in my analogy, to collide.
Right. Okay.
So we have the we have the motorway with a car driving along it.
Yeah.
We need to be concerned if there's a car coming from a side road that might crash into it. Yeah.
Okay.
Now the issue that we've got here is that the side road is not fixed; it's unclassified airspace.
Okay.
So there are any number of side roads in that analogy that might join the motorway at any point.
Yeah.
The only side road out of that, infinite's probably the wrong term, but large number of possibilities, the only side road we need to be concerned about is the one on which the Clauchrie wind farm is located.
Okay.
I think.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. And the way I was thinking about that one was, rather than thinking of a wind farm, think of a patch of cloud. If you were looking down from above and you had these roads potentially joining up, you had one patch of cloud over one of these roads. That's the only bit we really need to be concerned with, isn't it?
For this wind farm, yeah.
And if the patch of cloud was far enough away that somebody could take action, we don't really need to be too concerned about the cloud at all, do we?
I'm trying to build the picture in my head here. So the cloud is above the wind farm.
The cloud's the thing that obscures the fact that there might be a car there.
All right. Okay.
So once it comes out the other side of the cloud, the question is, does somebody have enough time to react to it?
Okay. All right. I've caught up with you now. Yeah, I'm with you.
Good.
It was just the idea of the cloud being down on the road that confused me.
It's not intentional, but in essence, I suppose what I'm trying to get to, Mr. Kirkland, is the only point at which we really need to be concerned is when the car pops out the other side of the cloud, or the plane pops out the other side of the wind farm. At that point in time, we need to be satisfied that there's enough time to address any safety issue, don't we? That's the concern that we have.
Yes, based on the assumption that we're avoiding flying our aircraft over the cloud, yeah?
Yes. I think if you just bear with me for 1 minute.
Yeah, no problem.
Those are all the questions I have, sir.
Thank you, Mr. McLeod. Mr. Kirkland, I've just got one question, I think, which comes back to CD 911 and Figure 8, which is this map of the new routes that's come out of the airspace change.
Yeah.
And the route that we've been discussing mostly today is the green route, runway 30 south arrivals there. And the applicant's position seems to be more strongly that this route will be used more in the future, whereas the airport's case seems to be more that it may be used, but there will also be other routes being vectored, not following this particular route. And then there's been some discussion. I think you've described this as the PBN route, from which I take you to mean that this is the route that can or is proposed to be used by aeroplanes that are equipped with RNAV equipment.
Yeah.
Could planes that are not equipped with RNAV equipment also be directed to use this route?
They could, in a certain extent. They couldn't fly it using the RNAV technology because they don't have it. Turnberry at the moment, the TRN there at the moment is a beacon. That's being removed. For the moment, the beacon is still there. So they could be and often are instructed. In fact, it's one of the standard arrival routes is they fly to the Turnberry beacon, and then they come off that beacon and fly a different approach. So yes, they could fly something similar, but the reality is that if you don't have RNAV, you're going to be vectored. If you've got radar, you're going to be vectored. There's no other real way of doing it. And it's probably worth mentioning, if you don't mind, sir, one of the reasons that you would vector aircraft that were RNAV equipped, you think about everything arriving via that TRN beacon. In a place like London City, and I won't take you back to that UK AIP document, but it very specifically lays out the speeds expected the aircraft to fly. Somewhere like Prestwick, with the variety of aircraft, the wide variety of aircraft that come into Prestwick for various reasons, military, etc., you have a lot of different speeds being flown by aircraft. So if you made them all fly the same RNAV route, again, like the motorway, or probably not like the motorway, more like the B road with one lane, you get stuck behind a tractor, in your Ferrari. And the only way to get around that is to fly a different road. And of course, there is no different road in RNAV world here. It's the only way, and therefore you'd be vectored. And that's a pretty common reason why aircraft will be vectored, is to provide the separation and not have this kind of bottleneck, if you like. And that's the problem with airports that have a variety of traffic like Prestwick enjoys or endures. You don't have this standardized speed environment.
And is that a real problem with Prestwick, which seems to be quite a low traffic airport? Would that scenario actually arise very often?
Well, it would if you made people fly the PBN routes all the time, yeah. Even with low traffic levels, clearly it wouldn't happen as often as it would if it was busier, but it's just an inefficient way of operating, because one aircraft flying and it was having to slow down and changing its flight profile, flying an extra 10 miles or whatever. It's not a good way of doing it. There's much better ways of doing it. So that's why PBN is not the be all and end all in this scenario, particularly at this type of airport.
Thank you. This term vectoring.
Yeah.
I think I understand what it means, but well, maybe I don't. Does it mean vectoring is when the air traffic controller is providing coordinates and routes to the pilot, and then the pilot is following it, or does vectoring mean being directed to follow a non-standard route?
So yeah, it does feel like perhaps this should have been clarified earlier. But when you're vectoring an aircraft, you're giving the pilot a heading to fly. So you would say, Virgin 023, turn right heading 030. And he would fly heading 030 because that's what the controller wants him to fly. So you're effectively providing a heading or direction for the pilot to fly. That's it. That's one of the fundamental techniques of air traffic control. And it's great because you put the aircraft exactly where you want it. If you've got another aircraft that you have to provide 3-mile separation, they're both locked on the same heading. They're never going to get closer. You know, so that's the fundamental nature of how air traffic service provision works in terms of providing radar separation. They're locked onto headings. So headings are how it's all done. It sounds simple, doesn't it? But it's not. There's more to it than that. But fundamentally, you're telling the pilot to fly a heading. That pilot is then under control, if you like, or being provided with a radar service and will not deviate from that heading.
So a pilot could be vectored to follow the green runway 30 south arrivals route.
It could be, but that would be, I wouldn't say ridiculous, but it wouldn't be a good way of doing it. What you would do is you would vector, and this is another valid technique. You can fly part of a PBN approach. So in order to cut out the Turnberry green transition line, if you were number 1, you would expect a more direct routing. So the controller could get you to you see the start of the blue line on the kind of, what's it, sort of T-bar type thing. So where the green line meets the blue line,
yes,
that's what we call a base leg. That turns onto your final approach. It would be reasonable and common for a controller to say to a pilot, and that point actually has a name, and it'll be in the aircraft's flight management system. You could route own navigation to that point and then take up the PBN approach, or you could give the pilot one heading, and it will take it to onto the final approach with one heading to turn it on. So, yeah, there's different ways of doing it. Again, it's all part of the mix, whatever works best at the time. All ways of doing it are pretty low workload for both pilot and controller.
So I think this is the final one for me. Looking at figure 8 and thinking about the video that we saw yesterday, and that video seems to be doing what you've just described there, cutting that corner to go straight across to the turning point there. In a scenario where Clauchrie was built and was appearing as clutter on radar screens, and air traffic controllers wished to avoid that clutter and decided to take all traffic up to the TRN point on that map and then follow the green path. The disadvantages of that would be it might be slightly longer and involve more fuel burn. And it might be this approach where you get stuck behind the tractor.
Right.
Those are those 2 main disadvantages.
Those are the 2 main disadvantages. And if I could just add that you know, in the future, when traffic gets busier, there's more argument for using these PBN approaches and insisting they fly them. But in the ACP document, actually, the PBN routes overall are slightly less efficient, slightly longer track miles and more fuel burn, but it's a balance against other things like population overflown and, you know, all the old sort of planning stuff. So in actual fact, at the moment, by vectoring, in some cases, you're making more efficient because efficiency is not the only factor in introducing PBN. So that's why they would do that instead of sending them to the Turnberry beacon.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kirkland. That's all.
Thanks, sir.
I'll pass you back now to Mr. Brown. If he's got any questions in re-examination, please.
Thank you, sir. Yes, just a few questions for you, Mr. Kirkland. Now, you'll remember that, Mr. Kirkland, you were taken to Prestwick's airspace change proposal, which is CD 9 stop 11, and you were taken to paragraph 451. And the point was made that the airport had identified when preparing this airspace change proposal that the large majority of aircraft were fitted so that they could, or equipped so that they could fly the PBN routes. Now, we heard Mr. Smith say yesterday that in his experience, only about, or up to 10% are taking advantage of these procedures at the airport. In the context of what's happening when an air traffic controller is vectoring an aircraft. There are two people in this process, although not. There's the commander of the aircraft and there's the air traffic controller. And as you explained in your earlier evidence on the published flight information, which is available, the commander can ask for a vectoring. In the context of the two people, the air traffic controller and the commander, who makes the decision as to the approach which is to be, or the method of approach which is to be followed?
Ultimately, it will be the controller, but the controller will normally try and provide what the commander wants.
Right. So if the commander asks, how likely is the commander likely to get the preferred method of approach?
Yeah, and they often do. They ask for the approaches, and 99% of the time, for the sake of argument, they're given what they want. Less so in a very, very busy environment, obviously, for obvious reasons.
Yes, so they wouldn't have that option in the London City example.
No, absolutely no.
But a Prestwick scenario, which was the contrast we made in your evidence in chief, they have the option of which.
Absolutely, 100%, yeah.
Now, in your cross-examination, a proposition was put to you about the fact that Clauchrie may not be mitigated on the air traffic controller screen. If that was to happen, what effect would that have on the air traffic controller's ability? Sorry.
In terms of service provision, they would avoid it.
Yeah. So they would still avoid it?
Yeah, if there was clutter on the screen, they would avoid it, yeah.
Thank you. And finally, the scenario was put to you about pop-up traffic and clouds and so on. You remember that, Mr. Kirkland?
I do, yeah.
Yeah. Now, just help us with this. How fast can an aircraft go in the sky?
So generally speaking, below 10,000 feet or so, there is a speed restriction, by and large, depending on the airspace, but normally it's 250 knots. So that's probably about 280 miles an hour. So I can't do the maths, but yeah, nautical miles are obviously bigger. So 250 knots is the normal, at the sort of levels we're talking about, between 180 and 250 knots. So that's, in other language, that's sort of between 3 and 4 miles a minute.
Right. And you've talked about tractors and Ferraris. And in terms of aircraft, if we convert that to the aircraft, what does that mean? Do all aircraft travel at the same speed?
No, of course not. You will get quite wide variations. You tend to find at airports that provide, your average airport that provides passenger freight services, they're generally similar types of aircraft. You'll see 737s, A320s, 777s, whatever. They're all kind of similar in terms of the speed ranges. But of course, when you start introducing propeller-driven aircraft, transport aircraft, military aircraft, you start getting the wide variations in speed, all the way down to light aircraft, which with a strong headwind can be moving over the ground at 30 or 40 knots. There's a massive variation in speeds. Speed control is actually a controller technique in order to ensure separation. So you will find at certain airports that controllers will dictate the speeds aircraft fly, and that's fine within certain limits. But if you've got a wide variety of aircraft types, you kind of have to let them do their own thing.
And what hazard does that create in the air when you've got aircraft at different speeds?
Well, aircraft will catch up. You've got to, ultimately you've got one way onto the runway. You have to get your aircraft in that line in a decent order so that they're far enough apart, but not so far apart you're losing efficiency. So you need to space them in a reasonable manner, and controllers will generally use their judgment and experience to do that.
So in the context of pop-up traffic,
yep.
what effect does that have on the hazard you just identified?
Well, clearly, an aircraft moving at 4 miles a minute will travel 4 miles in that minute, and therefore you don't have a lot of time. Particularly, you're scanning your whole radar display. You're not looking at each aircraft at the same time. You're focusing and you develop a scan technique. So you do get in the habit of looking at all your aircraft under your controller being provided with a service regularly, but you still may miss the first 10, 15, 20 seconds of that pop-up traffic being visible, which is reasonable. Then you have to make a decision to take action. What are you going to do? What are you going to say? Where are you going to turn the aircraft? And then the aircraft commander has to take control and carry out the maneuver. And of course, a jet aircraft moving at speed will not turn at 90 degrees. There's a, so there's a delay, there's a time lag. And that's why you have to have a reasonable buffer to give you a reasonable chance to avoid the aircraft.
And remind us, Mr. Kirtland, what variety of traffic uses Prestwick?
Well, it's pretty wide variety. So, your standard jet traffic, as you would get passenger sort of flights, large transport aircraft, military aircraft, both fast and slow, general aviation. There's a real wide variety, much wider than you would get at many other commercial airports like, Edinburgh, Glasgow, Southampton, whatever.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Kirtland. I have no further questions.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Thank you, Mr. Kirkland, for your time today.
Thank you, sir.
So I think that concludes the evidence we're going to hear this week. But we were going to come back to the issue of the questions, I think, again, at the end of the day. I don't know if there's any update to give me on where we've got to with that, Mr. Brown.
Sorry. I understand that the extracted list of questions has been passed to the applicant, but we've obviously been engaged this morning in taking the evidence. I wonder whether it might be appropriate to suggest maybe an adjournment for 30 minutes or so to find out whether the list can be agreed, in the hope that if that's the
Sorry, I was just going to say that sounds sensible, and we'll certainly endeavour to look at them and give you our views in 30 minutes. I think from what I understand, we were pretty much there last night, so we may not even need the full 30 minutes, but if that suits the reporter, then I'm quite happy to do that, come back at maybe 12:30.
Yes, I was going to say a bit more than 30 minutes, just to make sure that you have got time to have all the discussions you need to have. So let's say 12:30 then, and we'll come back. We'll come back then.
Thank you, sir.
Adjourned until 12:30. Thank you.
I'd like to go.
Hello. You're both with me, I see, Mr. McLeod, Mr. Brown. Yep. Thank you. I've received the email containing the attached questions. So thank you very much for that.
What we were intending to do, sir, we're not expecting you to read through the questions now, but we thought it'd be useful for you to have them just for the purposes of this discussion. The document starts with the list of questions, and it shows for your benefit which ones are agreed, which ones are the applicants, and which ones are GPAs. We've then got a table that follows on from that shows how the questions were developed, which you may find useful in terms of understanding how we got to where we got to. The intention was that you have the opportunity to have a look at the questions, have a think about whether there's anything else that you'd find helpful to ask of Terma, and just let us know. We would then take the table of questions, we'd remove that status column, and the questions would then just be asked of Terma. So Terma wouldn't know who was asking them, whether it was an airport question, a reporter question, or an applicant question. So I think Mr. Brown suggested that, and I think that's a fair and very sensible way to proceed.
Yes, indeed, sir. And sir, just taking forward the logistics of how to get the questions to Mr. Rees and get his responses. I had a conversation with Mr. McLeod, and subject to your approval, sir, we anticipate that, as Mr. McLeod has said, a list of the questions will be sent to Mr. Rees without him knowing who's asked the questions. And once, sir, we hear from your office and whether there are any questions you wish to add, Miss Cornelius, who's assisting me, will then prepare the clean list, and she will undertake to send Mr. Rees the email, copied to Miss Payton, who's assisting Mr. McLeod, and copied to Miss Akbar. And that email will attach the list of questions. It will point out to Mr. Rees, I'm sure he won't need reminded, but just remind him that he shouldn't speak to either party about the answers, that we're working to a tight deadline and would like his responses by midday on Friday, and that when he has his responses ready, he should send them back direct to Miss Akbar, copied to Miss Payton and Miss Cornelius.
That all sounds fine to me. Yes. Yeah, that was my question, just to make sure that there wouldn't be any communication between Mr. Rees and either party. So I'm glad you covered that. I'll aim to get my views on this back to you. I've just been asked the question of our admin people if I got my response to them by 4 p.m, whether they could get that relayed on to you. Ms. Akbar's actually on leave now, so there's a bit of an extra step in the process, but I don't anticipate that'll be a problem. But if it was Monday morning, that would still be fine.
That would be fine, sir, because I checked with Mr. Thompson during the break, and Mr. Rees is expecting the questions by about midday on Monday. Obviously, the more time we could give him, the better, but there is time available on Monday to finalise the questions and get them to.
Good. Then I'll do my best to get them out to you tonight. But if it's Monday morning, early Monday morning, then that would be fine. Okay. Well, I don't know if there's anything else to say. I'll certainly have a look at those this afternoon. Thanks for your efforts in pulling that all together. Hopefully, it'll give us some more enlightenment for our session in a couple of weeks. And we'll, if there's nothing else, we'll leave it there. And I don't know if either of you are in. Well, I don't suppose you're involved in our noise session on Monday, Mr. Brown. I don't know if you are, Mr. McLeod.
I'm pleased to say I'm not, sir.
Right. Okay. Well, I'll not see you either of you till Wednesday then, and I'm not sure exactly where we'll get through the conditions and other wrap up. So it might be a little after lunch. We'll just have to be a bit flexible about that. The only other thing to say was that I'm aiming to
And you, sir. Thank you.
And you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.